All right, so once again, guys, we've been listening in here to the trial of George Floyd live out of Minneapolis. You heard there, they're going to send the jury home for the day, and it's okay because we do also have someone who I want to join me here live, and so let's head on out to this special interview. I have Phoenix civil rights attorney Benjamin Taylor joining us, and so let's just kind of start with the top of the day as we had both teams coming out with their opening statements. What was kind of the tone that you saw here today?
I mean, I think the tone was very humble. You saw the prosecutor gave background of George Floyd and his life and what he was about. As far as the defense basically told a story that George Floyd might have died based upon drugs in his system, or might have died because of his own actions. So I think you see tells of two different stories that are going on in this trial today.
Now, let's just kind of start then with the state's opening statements. You know, right off the bat, they did show the video footage that some of the jurors said they'd never seen, they never watched in full. You know, was that a good tactic to have it right away in these opening statements?
Yeah, I think the prosecutor did a good job. You wanted to start off strong. Just like any trial, the things that the jurors are going to remember are the first things. And that picture and the video, that's the strongest thing that we remember throughout the whole trial. So I think the prosecutor did a good job by showing the video, having it framed in the jurors' minds, so they will be thinking about this all throughout the trial.
You know, one thing, though, that Eric Nelson, he's the defense attorney, had pointed out, and I had written it down, too. He said this is no social or political cause in case. It all comes down to the evidence. What did he kind of mean by that? Why was he putting that into the jurors' minds?
Basically, because this has been the top of all media for the past year. And he wants to make sure the jurors are not tainted by watching news stories, by reading the newspaper. And he wants them to focus on the facts of the case and the evidence that's right there in trial, and to judge his client, Derek Chauvin, based upon the facts of the trial, and not to be swayed by media attention and not to be swayed by a public outcry, because this case became not just national, but worldwide. So he wants these jurors who are in the courtroom to focus on the evidence and the evidence alone to judge his client. And he's trying to get a not guilty, of course, for his client.
You know, this morning outside of the courthouse, we did have people gathering together. They knelt for that over 8 minutes, but that's something that was emphasized too by the attorneys was 9 minutes, 29 seconds. They said Floyd said 27 times he can't breathe. I mean, there's no surprise that that was also added into that opening statement.
Exactly. The amount of time, I mean, that's a long amount of time. They held with a knee on your neck over 9 minutes. So the prosecutor wants to emphasize that to the juror. So no matter what training that Derek Chauvin had, no matter what he did, they want to emphasize that that was an extreme tactic, and that's what killed him, the knee to the neck, and that the drugs that were allegedly found in George Floyd's system.
Okay, so let's talk about the first witness, since we did have a few of them take the stand today. What do you think of the state's call for that 911 dispatcher to be their first witness to take the stand?
I think that was a good move. You want to show credibility. So a 911 operator is a person that a lot of people trust. They have a job where they're trying to help people. So you want to have a witness where people trust, so that way the jury can listen to that person. And the 911 operator kind of lay down the facts that she thought that this was, a little bit wild what she heard on the phone. So the 911 operator was a good job for the prosecutor to start off strong, the very first witness.
Yeah, she went on to say, that she had never called a sergeant before. And in this case, she thought she was kind of witnessing something unusual. And that was something that I kind of heard Eric Nelson saying, is that in your job line to be doing that? So how do you feel like Eric did with having the dispatcher on the stand there?
No, I mean, having the dispatcher on the stand to explain what she heard, and for her to want to call a sergeant, for her to, reach out to other people, you can tell by the emotions of the dispatcher. And that's what the jurors are watching. Jurors are watching every witness's eyes and their emotions. And you can tell by her emotions that she felt that this is an unusual call, and this is a different cause, and the 911 operator she doesn't get every day. So you can tell that this was something that she was concerned about, and she wanted the jurors to know that this was a call that, an unusual call, that she felt that something was wrong here. Even though it involved police officers, she felt for George Floyd based upon the testimony that you heard today.
And what are your thoughts then also, Ben, on the other witnesses that they called? We had that gas station worker who was down watching it unfold firsthand. She had been taking some video, and then we're in the middle of our third witness who will obviously have to be questioned by the defense, cross-examined by the defense tomorrow. But what about these other witnesses? Now we're starting to get into more people who were there in person watching this happen.
Yeah. So jurors tend to believe people who have no horse in the race. Witnesses who are just there, they have no bias. They're just there and they testify to what they observe. So having the person who worked at a store clerk, this gentleman right here who was testifying to MMA moves, these are witnesses who are just there on a normal day. And jurors tend to believe people who are just minding their own business, and they see this and they were shocked at what they saw. So they pretty much are just testifying to what they saw last year during the point where Derek Chauvin had the knee on George Floyd's neck. So I think it's a good job with the prosecutor to call these, we call them lay witnesses, people who are just normal people, everyday people who are just going to work. And you can tell they just came in there with a t-shirt on, regular people, when the witnesses, and that's very good to have these witnesses lay down the foundation of what to expect other witnesses. So when you hear more witnesses talk and say the same thing and the same fear that they felt, these jurors are going to feel the feelings and the emotions of these witnesses throughout the whole trial.
Now, towards the end there, we saw the judge send the jury out. So kind of walk our viewers through that. What was the reasoning to have that private conversation then with that witness? This is the MMA fighter who is trained in chokeholds. Why did he have to send the jury out and kind of talk a little bit more in depth with that witness?
So prior to trials, judges allow certain evidence to be allowed for the jury to hear, and certain evidence is not allowed to be heard. So the judge is reminding this witness, remember, you were here during the pretrial testimony, and you're not allowed to testify to certain aspects of this trial. So what the judge was saying was, warning the witness, you can't testify to certain aspects of how Derek Chauvin had the knee on the neck, because that can what you call a mistrial. So what that means is if a witness testifies to certain evidence that's not allowed, the judge can cancel the whole trial and call a mistrial. And that means you're picking a brand new jury, and it prejudices the defendant. Basically, in this case, the defendant has to be proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. So you want to make sure that all the evidence there is fair and that everything that comes in is not biased to one witness versus the other. So that's what the judge was pretty much explaining to the witness, is make sure you don't testify to things that you weren't allowed to, because remember, you were here when we talked about this, so don't go there.
And I think you pointed out something that I wanted to mention too. It just kind of struck me as, I sometimes forget that, while we have Derek Chauvin on trial, he is innocent until proven guilty. So that means the state's out there to prove his guilt, while Eric Nelson might just be there to prove, hey, this evidence does not mean that he's guilty.
That's correct. I mean, even though, the world might have their views and people might see this and see the knee on the neck and this call, Derek Chauvin automatically guilty, under our law and our Constitution, you're innocent until proven guilty. So that's what the job of the prosecutor is. The defense attorney doesn't have to prove Derek Chauvin's innocent. Under our law, as he steps into this courtroom, he is presumed innocent. Now, what the prosecutor is doing is calling witnesses to testify to prove his guilt, to prove the charges of second-degree murder, to prove the charges of third-degree murder, to prove the charges that Derek Chauvin did this and actually killed George Floyd. So right now, as we speak, Derek Chauvin is considered an innocent man throughout this trial until proven otherwise.
All right, so let's just quickly go into tomorrow. Obviously there'll be a number of witnesses still called to the stand. What are some of your thoughts on what we might expect to see from either side heading into more of this trial this week?
I think the prosecutor is going to hammer home all the witnesses that saw this, and one after the other, and just pretty much have a narrative that Derek Chauvin put the knee on George Floyd's neck and killed him. And the prosecutor's going to do that do this and prove their case by having witnesses testify to the same thing. The defense attorney's job is to cross-examine these witnesses, to say that they didn't see what they saw, to make sure they understand that, hey, George Floyd might have had drugs in his system, so you're not a doctor. So you wouldn't know, just because you're a witness, you don't really know what actually happened that day and what actually caused the death. So the defense attorney's job will be to bring in an expert witness in the future to try to prove that George Floyd died based on drugs in his system versus a knee on his neck.
Yes, sorry about that. I was having a little difficulties there with my system, but I do appreciate you taking this time. I know you were waiting and on standby here for a long time, so giving us a little insight to this trial, what we can expect. Benjamin Taylor, thanks again for joining us here on NewsNOW from Fox.
Thanks for having me.
And we will, of course, continue to have you fully covered here on NewsNOW from Fox in full, from gavel to gavel on this trial. So don't forget that you can continue to watch us here on NewsNOWFox.com. And I do want to head out to some more videos coming from Minneapolis. Now, during the trial, we were showing, obviously, that in full, but we did also have Minneapolis police along with some other leaders in the community